Economic freedom is about, yes, the freedom to buy and sell stuff, but it's also about the freedom to interact with people, to converse with people, to travel where we want, to say the things we want to say. These things that involve interaction with others are truly at the core of economic freedom. There's a tremendous body of evidence that suggests that economic freedom is associated with many of the things we think of when we think of a healthy society. We can look at the Economic Freedom of North America Index. States with more economic freedom have higher growth rates of the economy, they have lower unemployment rates, they have less debt per GDP than states that are less free. All of these things we associate with economic health are also associated with economic freedom. But we see the same phenomenon when we compare countries of the world. The most economically free countries have GDPs per capita that are about 10 times the size of less economically free countries. One might argue that what we're seeing is the big country effect. That is, big countries will tend to be economically free, and they'll also tend to have high GDP per capita. But if we restrict our vision to just the poorest 20% of countries, the poor countries that have the most economic freedom have GDP per capitas that are 50% greater than the poor countries that have less economic freedom. One counter-argument is that GDP per capita only measures average income. It's possible that you could have a country with a small number of elite, rich people and a large number of destitute people. But if we examine inequality measures, what we find is that the countries that are more economically free also have more equitable income distributions. That is, economic freedom is not only associated with higher income levels on average, but it's also associated with a more equitable income distribution. Skeptics might argue that economic freedom achieves greater income because of exploitation of people and exploitation of the environment. Let's look at the data and see if this is the case. On average, women in economically free countries have more gender equality than women in economically less free countries. Also, child labor rates tend to be lower in economically free countries and higher in economically unfree countries. One might argue that child labor rates are lower in economically free countries because economically free countries are richer and therefore can import products from poor countries that do not have child labor laws. In effect, the rich countries encourage the poor countries to exploit their children, so the rich countries don't have to exploit theirs. But if we look at the poorest countries, we see the same phenomenon. Even amongst the poorest countries, those with more economic freedom have lower child labor rates than those with less economic freedom.
The most important thing to understand about the modern world, actually, is that once people were very poor and now they're very rich. In 1800, the average person in the world made $3 a day. I mean, the modern equivalent of $3 a day. So the goods and services, the stuff you could buy in the amount of $3 a day. So 3/4 of a cappuccino per day, nothing else. In the last 30 years, the percentage of people who are that badly off in the world has fallen by half. It's been halved. So things are going very well. And for we in places like the United States, where they've gone exceptionally well since 1800, we're making, now hear this, $130 a day. And what a transformation. It's just incredible. Now, we had earned the $3 a day forever. So there was in history, if you want a short economic history, since the beginning of time, it was $3 a day going along like this. And then right here, which is 1800, it goes up like mad. And there's this fantastic transformation of the condition of ordinary folks. Why did it happen? One old explanation is exploitation. You hear this a lot. We are rich because there are a bunch of poor people elsewhere in the world who are poor. That's not true. There's always been exploitation in history, and it didn't cause economic growth. So it can't be modern exploitation. Nor can it be, to think of a more conservative way of looking at it, investment. It's not investment. It's not piling bricks on bricks or BAs on BAs. It's new ideas. It's innovation. The fantastic number of changes in machinery and materials and organizational ideas, such as the modern university or reinforced concrete. It's just amazing. That caused this hockey stick, the blade of the hockey stick. Why did this happen? Two changes in Holland and England in the 1600s and 1700s, which was a rise of economic liberty and social honor for inventors, merchants, manufacturers. Before, these were dishonored occupations, then they became honored. And out of that came a tremendous burst of innovation that had been earlier discouraged because they weren't free and they weren't honored.
Economic freedom also accompanies reduced exploitation of the environment. For example, deforestation is worst amongst the least economically free countries. Meanwhile, the most economically free countries actually experience reforestation. Their forests are growing. What sorts of countries cut down all their trees? What sorts of countries pollute their air? What sorts of countries wantonly kill their animals? There's a lot of variation, but on average, there's this underlying theme. Countries that are more economically free tend to protect their environments. Countries that are less economically free tend to despoil their environments. And this isn't a rich country, poor country thing. Even amongst the poor countries, those that are more economically free tend to protect their environments more so than the poor countries that are less economically free. I'm Antony Davies, professor of economics at Duquesne University. I and many other professors work with Learn Liberty, asking questions like, what is it we can do to help make our world a better place? How is it that we can institute rules that help to protect the environment? And time and again, we come back to the same answer: economic freedom. More so than any other tool that humans have ever employed, economic freedom, on average, tends to be the tool that best protects the environment.
I know how to get a free suit. All I have to do is go to Macy's, get a suit, charge it, and then when the bill comes, rip it up. Ethical issues aside, you see the main problem with this approach is that I can only do it once. The next time I go to Macy's, they'll know, because they made a note of it last time, that I rob suits, and they won't give me another one. But I have a clever idea. I'll go to Penny's and get a free suit there. But hang on. When I try to get my free suit from Penny's, they won't give me one either. Macy's has told them that I'm a suit thief. That's odd. One view of the marketplace is that it's a dog-eat-dog world of hostile competitors. The philosopher Thomas Hobbes saw the whole world that way. Since Macy's and Penny's are competitors, you might expect that Macy's would hope that I would rob Penny's next. That would even things out. But they don't. In fact, they share information about thieves. They've figured out that in the long run, it's in their mutual best interests to help each other crack down on theft. That's more important to them than short-term getting even. If they didn't share what they know, they'd be cut off from a tremendous information network about theft. So helping the other guy isn't contrary to their self-interest at all. Despite their being competitors, they have a strong incentive to be cooperative. Even more interesting is that they came up with this system on their own. It wasn't a grand design by enlightened rulers, a top-down plan. Rather, it was a bottom-up system that evolved organically by the merchants as they figured out how to manage their affairs. Long before the advent of the department store, merchants realized that cooperation among competitors was an absolute necessity. So many mechanisms in their world depend on trust and reputation issues. Not just in their world, though, in mine and yours. When I first told you my plan for getting a free suit, you might have objected that I ought to be afraid of being jailed, and that seems to require a government with a top-down plan. But even if the fear of jail were taken out of the equation, I would still have good reason to pay my bill. The same networks of trust and reputation that the merchants depend on are things that I depend on as well. To have a job, a home, a car, to be able to buy plane tickets or go to a restaurant. In an important way, we're all merchants. We all trade with each other. Not only are we capable of cooperating, we generally do. Society is full of these organic or spontaneous orders, everything from language to fashion, from internet memes to prices in a market. The basic concepts of Anglo-American common law, as well as the international merchant law, evolved in a similar fashion, the result of people's attempts to work out the most mutually beneficial ways of living and working together. So when people tell you that society can't solve its problems without force applied from the top down, you're right to be skeptical. Mechanisms that facilitate and are based on social cooperation are all around us.
There are now over 300,000 Americans on dialysis. Every year, about 60,000 die. Kidney transplants are hard to get, but hundreds of millions of Americans have a kidney to spare. The numbers are heavily in our favor, but the tragedy goes on year after year. Almost no one wants to endure surgery to help a total stranger for free, and selling your kidney is illegal. Voters and the politicians they elect have banned the trading of cash for kidneys. Why? Because they underrate the social benefits of markets. They suffer from what I call anti-market bias. People who've never studied economics often equate greedy intentions with bad results. Economists share a standard objection to this bias. Thanks to competition, the surest way to get rich is to make your customers happy. As the 18th century economist Adam Smith put it, it is not from the benevolence of the butcher, the brewer, or the baker that we expect our dinner, but from their regard to their own self-interest. Think about reviews on websites like Yelp. If you give your customers good value, they'll come back and tell others to do the same. If you rip your customers off, they go elsewhere next time and tell others to do the same. When customers are free to choose, firms can't put profits before people. If they do, they lose their people and their profits. Economists' appreciation for markets leads us to unconventional solutions to all sorts of problems. Take the kidney shortage. Most people would shrug that there are no more kidneys available, but that's false. If just one person in 1,000 donated a kidney, everyone on dialysis could get one. There's just one problem. Asking someone to give you a kidney is a huge favor, the kind of favor only people who know and love you will agree to do. Love already saves a lot of lives, but it's clearly not enough. So why not legalize a market for human kidneys, where people who desperately need kidneys could buy one from a willing donor? Regardless of their politics, almost no one who isn't an economist sees merit in this idea, and almost everyone who is an economist does. Some worry that low-income people would be first in line to sell. But what's wrong with making poor people rich and sick people well? This doesn't mean that economists always favor unregulated markets. Unlike the typical voter, though, economists rarely complain because business is making money by solving a problem. Economists complain when business isn't making money by solving a problem.
I argue in favour of allowing markets in human kidneys. I think that people should be allowed to buy and sell kidneys, just like they do any other commodity that's traded between willing, consenting, rational adults. But we don't have to give complex theoretical arguments in favour of markets in human kidneys. We can just look at the human stories. Take, for example, Peter Randall. Peter Randall became famous in 2003 for offering his kidney for sale on eBay. He wasn't doing this as a publicity stunt or because he was greedy and wanted a new Ferrari. He was doing it because he thought it was the only way in which he could raise enough money to pay for the therapy of his daughter Alice, who at the time was 6 years old and suffering from cerebral palsy. Allowing a market in human kidneys would allow somebody like Peter Randall to sell his kidney legally and safely in order to secure the money that he needs to help his daughter, or for whatever other reason he might have for wishing to secure it. And notice that it's not just concern for Alice Randall and her father Peter that might drive us to allow a market in human kidneys. He received at least 3 very serious offers, all from the United States, from people who needed his kidney to continue to live, or else to rescue themselves from crippling dialysis. Now, you might object and say that the gift of life is simply too priceless to put a price tag on, and so we should continue to keep kidney sales illegal. But this seems rather odd. After all, when we have a transplant operation from a living donor into the body of a living recipient, everybody in the operating theatre is being paid. The anesthesiologist, the surgeons, the nurses. The only person who is not being paid is the person who is actually giving up the most precious commodity of all, the kidney. I think that that's morally wrong, and I think that we should allow payment for kidneys, just as we allow payment for all other types of medical services and products. Banning kidney sales means that somebody like Alice Randall won't get the therapy that she needs, and the people who wanted to buy her father's kidney either will not get to see their children grow up, or else will do so only through the mask of the pain of dialysis.
Economic freedom is about the freedom to act. The more freedom we have to act, the more able we are to do the things we want to do, to create wealth, to protect the environment, to help people be equal across genders, to help children no longer have to work in factories. It's about being free to make your own choices and to live with the consequences of those choices, provided that you do not violate anyone else's freedom. The more economic freedom we have, the more able we are to make the world a better place. Join me and many other professors as we ask this question and many other questions about what it is that can help make our world a better place. Give us 3 minutes of your time and an open mind. We'll rock your world.